Time now for the French newspapers. Elena's here with us here in the studio. Going to something quite serious to start with. This fascinating ceremony yesterday, the French soldiers killed in Afghanistan, on the front page of Le Figaro. And for those people, like most of us, I suspect, who haven't seen the kind of French tradition behind it, it was quite extraordinary, wasn't it?
It was. We had the French state in all of its pomp and pageantry yesterday at the Invalides for that ceremony of memorial for the 7 French soldiers killed last week in Afghanistan. That leads the front page of Le Figaro today. They start with a quote from Sarkozy from yesterday saying, "You've defended the finest values of our nation." That's what he said in the memorial address, talking to those soldiers. Now, the paper says it just illustrates how important it is to have these kind of ceremonies, which might seem a little overblown to foreigners, but they say it's important. It rebuilds the link between the French army and the French people. They say they go over a little bit about this controversy that we've had recently about the Bastille Day parade and whether or not it's too militaristic for the 21st century. They say absolutely not. This illustrates that there are still French soldiers dying abroad for important causes. They say the French soldiers helped install Alassane Ouattara as the legitimate president of Ivory Coast. They're helping defend the rebels in Libya. All of these are spreading French values abroad, they say, of freedom and democracy. And it's terribly important that the French state celebrates them. They are dying for a cause, if you like. That not necessarily an opinion shared, though, in the left-wing press. If we look at the communist paper L'Humanité, inside there they take a very different view on the deaths of these soldiers, saying really that their deaths are pointless. They say there's no longer any clear sense of what France is fighting for in Afghanistan. 10 years on after the start of that war, the Taliban seem to be taking back territory. The population are if anything, more disillusioned with coalition troops than ever before. They say when US drone strikes and so on are helping build support for Islamic terrorists, according to L'Humanité. They say it's clearer than ever also that the French army doesn't do anything without a signal from the US, so maybe France should stop trying to be an international military power, they say, and concentrate on diplomacy.
Now, the next story you're going to go on to is it's a bit of a crossover, because for several weeks now you've been talking about the Murdoch story in your international paper review, and today you can talk about it in the French one for the first time, which is quite incredible, really, isn't it?
Yeah, the French papers just seem to be realising that something quite significant happened in the British Parliament yesterday, and they do, in fact, seem to be reeling in shock at just who Rupert Murdoch is and how much of the French press and TV he owns, which, of course, we take for granted, don't we, as Anglo journalists, really. But Libération, for example, has looked into... They explain who he is and everything that he owns to their French readers, because Rupert Murdoch actually isn't a well-known name in France, although he's obviously hugely famous throughout the English-speaking world. And the paper really demonstrates absolute shock that successive British governments, Labour and Conservative, have gone so far to court the political support of one man, whereas we probably take it for granted that the Sun wins elections, for example. But they say it's shocking to a French audience that papers should be able to exert so much power on the electorate. They say French newspapers don't do that. We should bear in mind that France doesn't really have a tabloid popular press in the sense that we do, and that these newspapers have much smaller readerships than British tabloids. So, and they also tend to be less politically partisan than the tabloids, but they say they certainly don't exert influence in quite such a way.
Yeah, it's very different, isn't it?
Exactly, and that might be surprising to us, that they should be surprised, if you like, but their shock at the way governments allowed one man to take control of so many newspapers, so many TV channels, probably shouldn't shock us, because Libération points out most countries in Europe have laws to prevent that kind of media ownership control happening by one person.
And there's another story as well, which is if you're a British guy like me, I'm used to the weather being all over the newspapers, a bit like Rupert Murdoch, but it's all over the French papers as well. Yes,
the weather is horrendous at the moment. This is on the front page of Le Parisien. It's grey, it's pouring down. This is on the beach in the south of France, this picture, not here in Paris. So the weather's dreadful everywhere. They've got miserable people having their 2 weeks supposedly in the sun. They're actually camped out under canvas. And... But in Libération, if we just have a quick look at that, they're saying that even when the sun is out, French beaches aren't quite what they're cracked up to be abroad. They say French Riviera was once famous for libertinism, but apparently the era of topless sunbathing is over. They've done a poll. 88% of French women aren't prepared to do it, and a full 50% think that other people should cover up more on the beach.
I think they'll definitely be covering up at the moment. It's absolutely pouring down all day in Paris yesterday. All right, Elena, thank you very much. That's Elena here with the French newspapers. Back with the international ones a little bit later on.